Hi everybody and welcome to A Question of Property. Joining me on the panel here today, we have Paul Mahoney, Head of Nova Financial Group. We have John Howard, our property expert of more than 40 years and author of more than 3 books, Buying and Selling at Auction being the most recent, and Stefano Locatello, Senior Partner at Cobalt Law International Property Lawyers. So welcome to all of you.
Morning.
Morning. Guys, we've got lots of questions to get through, so I'm going to start there with John for the first one. Obviously, we are in the middle of COVID-19 at the moment, and we've had people asking questions of what they should do given the situation that they're in and how things have changed. So this person is halfway through the conversion of 3 flats. Should I stop work now or continue, knowing that the values might be less than I first thought when finished?
Well, it's a very good question, and obviously whoever's emailed that in is obviously very concerned and worried, and I feel for them. Being a developer, being an investor, having a project half finished can be quite scary in a situation like this, because one, even if you want to finish it, you probably can't get the materials at the moment, which I find very odd that materials can be delivered to site. And I cannot see why they've closed all those types of businesses, because it seems madness to me. Anyway,
I thought they were considered essential work. Still.
Well, I would have thought so, but a lot of them have closed. A lot of them have closed.
Right.
It's a shame, especially paint businesses. Well, you think people want to paint the houses at home, wouldn't you? You leave them open, they can deliver it. But anyway, never mind. So this situation, if they've got the money to finish, I would definitely finish it. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One is if they don't finish it and they get into trouble, they'll be selling it to people like me at a knockdown price. And they definitely don't want to do that. And if they finish it, if they've got the money to finish it, they've got some options. They might be able to rent it. They might be able to sell them still, but for less money, perhaps, maybe not. They may be able to refinance it. There's 3 options there, perhaps, potentially. Whereas at the moment, if you don't finish it, you've got one option, and that's to sell it to someone like me at auction or privately. But either way, it won't be a good outcome. So
your advice is to just get it finished by any stretch that you can.
I know it might be a hollow victory, as it were, because in as much that you might be working for nothing virtually, but you've got more options when it's finished. And like we said in the last show, you could always, if you can afford to, you could rent them and keep them for a few years and then sell them. You've got more options, so please try and get them finished. Yeah.
So Paul and Stefano, any thoughts on that situation?
Yeah, just a comment. I suppose it depends how much work that they've got left to do.
Yes.
But at the moment, it's not really a good time to be finishing a property right now, because finding a tenant is almost impossible. And refinancing is almost impossible. But I suppose
selling is almost impossible as well.
What's that, sorry?
Selling is almost impossible as well.
I tell you what, I can't stand the negativity here. It's unbelievable.
No, let me finish. I suppose what I was thinking was that if there is 3 to 6 months work to be done there, and they can manage to finish it in that 3 to 6 months, hopefully that gets us out of this COVID-19 situation. And actually, there is without doubt going to be a pent-up demand with regards to people wanting to buy properties at that point in time. Regardless of what happens in the economic cycle, I advise people on investing in property on a day-to-day basis, and I know people want to buy, but a lot of people are waiting, which is understandable.
Yeah. So in that case, it could actually be a good time, really, to get everything done that you need to do.
To leave yourself in a position, if you can financially finish it, of course, exposed by not having it finished is madness.
And Stefano, any thoughts to that situation?
No, John said it all.
Okay. Okay, let's move on to the question then for Stefano. I have a foreign mortgage. I can't pay it as I'm now on furlough, and I don't have enough to pay my English outgoings, let alone my foreign mortgage. What should I do? What happens if I don't pay my mortgage? I'm assuming they mean the foreign one here. And would the bank chase me in the UK and take my assets here, or am I safe? So it's a lot of questions, but yeah, I suppose it's the secondary mortgage or outgoings.
The first thing to do is to contact the lender in Spain, Italy, France, Portugal, wherever it is. If you can't speak to them direct, get someone who can speak the language to contact them and to voice your message to them, which is that you can't pay it. Also send them an email. There must be a contact email, but all foreign banks always have a department that speaks English. They always have English speakers, so there is no reason why you should not be able to contact them by telephone, but I would stick it in an email as well, telling them that you can't afford to pay and proposing that you either have a 3-month holiday period within which, of course, the interest will continue to come, but you have a 3-month period where you don't pay, and that after that 3 months you will come back to them with some proposals, or go straight back to them and say to them, you know, I can't pay all of it, but I can pay a third of it, half of it. Are you happy to receive that? Do not stick your head in the sand. Do not just pay less than you would normally without telling the bank or the lender. Can they do something about it? Yes, of course they will. Because of the European Enforcement Treaty between all the country members of the European Union, Spain, France, Italy, and Portugal will send people to come and get the money from you. So what they'll do is they'll issue proceedings. If you fail to respond in Spain, France, Italy, they'll get a judgment. That judgment will then be sent to the High Court in the Strand. It'll be translated into English and transferred to a sheriff's officer, and the sheriff's officer or a bailiff, probably a sheriff's officer, will come round and knock on your door, and he will say, I've been sent by such and such to recover a loan. What can you do? But the problem is then, of course, if you've got a sheriff's officer at your door, he will take walking possession of your goods for 21 days, which means you can't sell anything and do anything, and it's a real problem. So yes, you must continue to pay your mortgage if you can. If you can't, excuse me, tell the bank and enter into some form of arrangement. Remember that banks are also, foreign banks especially, are prone to doing this. They sell their loans off to companies which then charge you a higher rate of interest. Had one the other day where he's possibly being charged 46% per annum from an interest rate of 3 or 4%. So you must be very, very careful. You cannot just bury your head in the sand and do nothing about it. And the same goes in England. I would have thought, John and Paul, the same thing.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, Stefano, how long will it take for that process to happen if you stop paying, do you think?
3 months. Usually a bank abroad will wait 3 months, and then what he'll do is he'll start proceedings. And the worst thing, of course, about it is that if it does go all the way and judgment is obtained in Spain, they could also, in the meantime, sell the property. They can put it to public auction. In France, Spain, Italy, and Portugal, they have the system of public auction. So if you get judgment, you're allowed as the creditor to put it to a public auction, and then you might find yourself having to buy it back.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very scary situation, I imagine, for a lot of people there. Do you think that most banks would be amenable to a suggestion of paying less, or paying, you know, half or whatever you were meant to be paying?
Banks want to receive some. Banks all over the world want to receive something. They depend on income coming in, and they depend on something of a movement of money. So if you're paying something, it's better than nothing. They will say, well, we're not very happy, but you know, at the end of the day, you will have to. The other thing is, Lucia, you will have to prove, in most cases, you'll have to do a schedule of assets and liabilities. So you'll have to say, look, this is what I was earning beforehand. This is what I'm earning now, which is whatever. I can't afford it. This is what my outgoings are. I can offer you, instead of 100%, I can offer you 50, 25% for a period of time. I'll catch up and ask for a period of 12 months to catch up in, and to review it every 6 months, let's say. But you need to have that constant dialogue with your lender, because otherwise the lender will say, well, I mean, he's in default. I've got the permission in the agreement to do what I want to do, which is to recover possession of the property, sue you for the interest, and the money's not paid, send a sheriff around, and it becomes really complicated. The other thing is, of course, you will find yourself as an English citizen with a registered debt against a judgment against your name. So when you go for credit, if you ever go for credit again in the future, you'll have a problem.
Yes, so it's going to affect everything in the UK. And Paul, any thoughts on that?
Also, it's worth keeping in mind that obviously at the moment, lenders in the UK are pretty flexible with regards to mortgage holidays and that sort of thing. So it's definitely in their best interest to contact their lender and ask for that if they need it. We've had a lot of questions about whether people should be applying for these things, both on the the residential and the buy-to-let side. And so far as I understand, although they might get 3 months of not having to pay, that 3 months is just added on to the end of their mortgage. So they are going to have to pay it at some point anyway.
Yeah.
So the guidance we've been giving is to only do it if you have to. Otherwise, you're extending your mortgage period.
Yeah, it's not a holiday as such. It's just sort of deferring it till a future date, isn't it? So yeah, that's very sound advice there. Anything else to add to that, Stefano?
No, not really. I mean, I think we're in a very fluid situation. I think if the situation gets worse, notwithstanding the fact that John thinks it's going to get better, but if the situation does get worse, I think banks will have to come into a common thought, which is, yes, we're going to have to give people holidays, and we are going to have to stop paying the payment of interest, because if people haven't got money, what are you going to do? If you haven't got money, you can't pay it, and if they can't live and they don't have a house and all the rest of it, I think this has got a long chain of progression to go, and I think we're just at the start of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, a question now to Paul, please. Do you think the British banks will be in any financial difficulty after this situation, sort of linking on from what Stefano was just saying?
Yeah, look, always try to be positive, but I think that there has to be, well, there is going to be repercussions on lenders, and I had a long conversation with somebody about this yesterday, so far as where the buck stops with regards to mortgage holidays, that sort of thing. For example, a residential or commercial tenant refusing to pay means that, the landlord's not getting their money. The landlord then refuses to pay their lender, and the lender's not getting the money. And that seems to be where that buck stops. So it is going to affect it seems like it will affect the revenues of banks. But of course, in saying that, it's in the best interest of government to have robust banks, to therefore have a robust economy. So the government is helping out individuals and businesses to a certain extent. And they'll probably have to help out some banks to a certain extent at some point when this flows through that cycle that I think Stefano referred to before. So again, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know which banks are going to be in trouble, but it'd be hard. I think it's hard to just assume that they're not going to be in trouble, because I think some probably will. Yeah.
And John, any thoughts on that situation?
Yes, I love banks, as you know. I really love them. I actually got an offer from a bank on Saturday morning, which I was very pleased to sign and send back, I can assure you. And that was at 3%, so that's pretty good.
Okay.
But I'm only borrowing 50%, of course, and that makes a huge difference what you're borrowing.
Yeah.
So what I would say is that British banks have been stress tested after the last disaster in 2008 to a very, very strict level. I'm told much stricter than most other European banks and world banks. So I think in this country we're better off probably than certainly some of the other European banks. I mean, especially someone like Italy, obviously, who presumably, Stefano, is bankrupt, isn't it now, isn't it?
We are never bankrupt, John. We are one of the only countries in the world that has its own gold reserves, my friend. 21 trillion euros worth of it.
Well, you might need to sell some of that, I think, the way things are going.
Our banks never go into bankruptcy. They're always picked up by the government.
Yeah,
funny enough, like the banks in the United Kingdom were.
Can I just say, thank goodness we're not in Europe anymore, because we'd be supporting Italy once again, and all the other countries that can't look after themselves.
John, I heard the other day that Italy's deciding on whether to come out of Brexit. They're doing the Europe thing. They're doing a Brexit themselves, and Italy
good for them. I know you and I disagree on it, but there we go.
We don't disagree on anything, John.
Are we going to go down the Brexit route? How is COVID-19 going to affect the Brexit situation, do we think?
Just one point on what John said, and I should have raised it myself. It is a good point. The lending in the UK is quite robust. We spoke earlier about buy-to-let. When you think about an average maximum lending of 75%, and I think the average across the landlords in the UK is about 60-65%. that means that the equity in those assets that the bank's money is secured against is substantial. So, for them to lose money on those assets is very unlikely, in my opinion. So there is that consideration that actually they're not overstretched to any extent, in my opinion.
The only thing I would say, Paul, is the ones that concern me are the bridges, because they're charging, in some cases, 15 to 20%. They've borrowed more. Most people that bridge tend to borrow more. Some of them are 75, 80% probably.
John, they're usually private equity money as well. So,
yeah, true.
They lose their money. No one's going to shed a tear, are they?
No, let's not worry about them, eh?
Okay, so another question for you here, John, now. When everything is back to normal,
Yes.
do you think that the domestic residential market is going to take a hit on values?
Okay, so this is what I think will happen.
Crystal ball time.
It's a crystal ball time, of course it is. But as long as we don't have massive job losses, and we come out in the next 8 weeks or so, we are seeing in our final country offices we have across Norfolk, we're seeing most our sales, agreed sales, holding together at the moment. And we believe that there is a pent-up enthusiasm and demand for people moving and getting on with it once we come out of this, as long as it's not too long. And the government realise that the housing market is hugely important to the economy. Massively important. You think you buy a house, you put new carpets in, you put new kitchen in, bathroom, builders, roof, heating, it goes on and on and on. So as long as we come out relatively quickly, we believe that the domestic market should hold up okay. Yes, there'll be the odd person that can't go ahead because they've lost their job, and of course they will, and and there won't be a massive growth. We know that as well. As for the developers and people who have got high interest, high borrowings, that's very different, and there will be opportunities there going forward without question.
I think this is a good time actually to ask now to all of you, what do you see as, we're trying to keep a positive spin on things here today. What do you see as being some of the positives to come out of this situation in terms of the property market and in terms of all of your sort of specialisms?
Well, I think that people, because the majority of people who own homes abroad are their homes abroad are second homes, they're not main homes. I think we'll find a glut of international property in the next 3 to 6 months, because people will not be able to pay the mortgages, or people will want to sell because they don't want to be owning a property abroad, because they're finding that they're having to tighten up the belts, and the money that they need is for the United Kingdom, and the foreign property is no longer what they want. On the converse side of things, I think there will be a fantastic market for people who want to buy at a lower price. And I think prices in France and Italy and Spain will fall even more, especially in France. And I think that there will be a glut of property, which means that the market will come back in, let's say, 6 months' time. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Stefano.
Look, I think things like this create innovation. People are now having to deal with working from home and how to make their businesses more flexible and generate revenue in new ways without having to be face to face with people. So I think in some ways that's quite a positive. We've already seen environmental improvements due to COVID-19 over a period of short weeks, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Something that I had a conversation about yesterday, and we have to be very careful about the sensitivity of these types of conversations. But I think it is worth mentioning is that the impact and the deaths and things that COVID is having at the moment is tragic, obviously. As far as
sorry, Paul. Can I just get you to say that again? Obviously, we all agree the situation is tragic, and then it just glitched a little bit.
Yeah, sorry. So I want to say this in the most sensitive way, but one of the biggest worries of the economy over the next few decades was a major impact of the aging population. and potentially long term things. Some of the things that are happening at the moment could lighten that burden. Is a conversation. It's a very difficult conversation, obviously, but potentially, sometimes these, they talk about swings and roundabouts. Sometimes that there is something worth considering.
Yeah, thanks very much, Paul. And John,
Well, I think what might come out of this is that people realise they need to look after themselves better. I think the health of certainly the health of people is more important now than ever. And I think this dreadful virus has tended to attack people with ill health. It has affected other people as well, but I think people certainly need to look after themselves better health-wise going forward. Type 2 diabetes is one example, so that's very important. From a business point of view, I think some businesses that perhaps were teetering on the edge anyway financially, obviously this will push them over and put them out the misery, if you like.
Yeah.
Other businesses will become stronger, and I think there'll be, like any turbulence in any market, which there will be on the investment stroke, commercial market especially, there will be opportunities, and it's for people like me and others listening to this show to take advantage of those in a sensible, decent way.
I guess it's affecting so much of people's lives, isn't it? It's kind of like travel and everything. Do you think it's going to affect within the property market the way that people work? Like, do you think going forwards, more and more people just will continue to work from home and more sort of satellite offices like that?
I had a conversation yesterday with a client of mine who's a manager in a very large London city-based company with about 5,000 employees in London, right. All of which are now working from home. And she told me that after this is all over, they're going to aim for half of those people to continue to work from home.
Wow.
So, that's 2,500 people from one company that are now not going to be working in the City of London. That for landlords, of commercial landlords, that's not necessarily a positive thing, but certainly for new businesses and people that do need office space, in a place like London that's super expensive, that creates opportunity as well, because I think without doubt rents are going to come down.
Yeah,
well, I think we're going to find that institutional landlords, people in the city, in the Docklands, they're going to find many of their premises empty, because I have a friend of mine who works for ASOS, the online clothes manufacturer. They have 3,000 employees. They've now got 2,000 of them working from home, and then another 1,000 in the next few days are going to be working from home as well. That means there's going to be anyone there, and they've decided that probably the majority of them can work from home in the future.
Amazing.
People like Google at King's Cross, and in Old Oaks, in Old Street, where all the technology people are, they've all realised that they don't need to be in buildings which cost a lot of rent to maintain to actually exercise the businesses. High-tech businesses like that don't need premises like that.
I suppose in that way, maybe Stefano and guys, like, that's going to help them to potentially recoup some of the losses that they might have had. Do you think there will be a different way that the actual owners of the properties use that space now that they're not using them as offices?
Well, I think that certainly, of course, with the PD schemes around at the moment, people will look at other ways of developing and dealing with their own properties. The biggest problem a lot of these landlords are going to have, and we all have it, is empty rates. Empty rates is a massive amount of money for people. And of course, if you're a shop at the moment, you're not paying any rates for a year. But if that shop becomes empty, it's the poor old property landlord investor, people like me, having still to have to pick up the rates. That is, unless it's listed. If it's listed, there's no rates.
I think, Lucia, just one point. I think that the planning laws will change. I think the planning laws will become, will go towards more and more office buildings being given permission to change into residential, hotels, places like the Docklands. I think you'll find that lots of those office buildings will become residential places. They'll become hotels and residential, and people will the Docklands will change from being an office place to being a residential place, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, in Canary Wharf, at the moment there's over 20,000 flats being built, you know, already. I'm not sure they need any more, which will be interesting, because if the property market in London gets a bit cheaper, even I might be able to afford to buy one.
Thanks very much for watching A Question of Property here today. My name's Lucia France, and you can email us if you have any questions that you'd like to be answered in a future show. ask@aquestionofproperty.co.uk. That's ASK, ask@aquestionofproperty.co.uk. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.